All right, so welcome everybody. Hello, my name is Jordan Sanga. I'm the CIO at Oregon Purse and also the programs director for the Portland chapter of SIM. So if you're not familiar with SIM, it's the Society for Information Management, which is a premier professional membership for IT leaders in the Portland area. So welcome to the last series of Women in IT. Although it is the last series, the good news is that Shasha and I are looking to continue the series later this fall. So very important here. If you have topics you'd like us to discuss, please fill out the survey at the end of the session. The survey will actually show up in your inbox. So Sasha, you want to go ahead and kick things off?
Sure. Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you could join us for our third in a three-part series, our lunch series for SIM Women. It's part of a broader initiative that SIM has been sponsoring to really advance our initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So our topic today is building diverse teams through creative and proactive activities. This is a big topic for a number of folks. So we're going to dig into it after I just go over a few of the logistics and then our agenda. So real quickly, the vision for this series was to take broader topics that many of us have experienced in diversity panels or when we've attended webinars and break those down into smaller subcategories that allow to really dig into more of the tactical aspects of the conversation. So one of the key aspects that we're taking on today really is that, branding, recruiting, how do you basically expand the candidate pool? So our format today is Q&A. We have two great panelists for you. Please feel free to use the chat box to submit your questions. One of the survey comments came back and asked for there to be more interaction and opportunity to ask questions. So when we go through these topics, please jot those down or put them in the chat box because we've actually created a little bit more time for Q&A. And we want to make sure that we give you all an opportunity to frame up your questions. So real quick, as Jordan mentioned, this is the last part where you're planning on kicking off another series in October. We're going to take a break in September because there's a lot of SIM activities and people are getting back to school. And so our hope is that you will take a few minutes. We usually get about 10 people to respond to the survey. We'd really appreciate everyone taking 5 minutes max and specifically submitting subjects and topics because we want to frame up the next 3 sessions really focused in the areas that you want us to address. So on that note, Tito, do you mind pulling the agenda up real quick? Oops. Well, we'll start with our panelists. We'll go to our agenda. So real quick, we've got 2 great panelists for you today. I'm very excited. They're both local IT leaders here in the Portland, Oregon area. I should say Portland and broad area. Melody's actually resides in Eugene. Michelle Suarez is with clearly a brand that everybody probably knows if you're from Oregon. Is with the Trailblazers. She's the VP of technology there. She's coming up on her 1-year anniversary in November. And prior to that, she spent about 12 years really consulting and driving global IT projects across a number of different disciplines. Application development, websites, you name it. It looked like she's done it in her background. And one of the things that she was excited to report out the last time that she sat on a panel for us was the fact that with her last 3 hires, she was able to add diverse candidates. And so we're excited to hear more about how she was able to actually track those candidates into her group. Then we have Melody Riley-Rouse, who is basically the Associate CIO for Middleware and Applications at the University of Oregon. She's been there for a few years now. I should say she's been in higher ed for a few years because she had a stint in there with Oregon State University also. But prior to that, she'd spent 18 years in a number of different roles where really she came from building relationships across different groups with the state of Oregon. So she accumulated that experience over 18 years where she really landed in the CTO seat. So excited to have her be joining us here also today. So to move quickly through our topics or get on to our topics, what we want to do is give you a quick overview of what we'll run today. We're going to be looking at the impacting of hiring when it comes to diversity and vision planning, the role that attracting talent basically has, some of the best practices and creative ideas, and the power of encouragement. And at the end of this, we will offer you some resources that ladies will probably reference in this conversation And we ask that you use the survey for us to know that that's something you'd like us to send you. So on that note, we always end this with, want you to walk away with one takeaway, something that you can use in your practice today. And we hope that you, like I said, will take the time to give us some feedback so we can continue to enhance the series. On that note, we're going to move into our panelists. So I'm going to start off the conversation quickly because I think diversity, DEI, has become a really critical topic, and people are starting to actually track the statistics related to the importance of that to your candidates. So currently, Glassdoor has a statistic that 67% of job seekers consider workplace diversity an important factor when considering employment opportunities, and more than 50% of current employees want their workplace to do more to increase diversity. So if you're a leader, a practicing leader, building a team, just know this is a critical topic that your employees or potential employees, right, are asking to see activity and initiatives around. On top of that, given that this is a group of technology leaders, we are running about 10% behind on standards in regard to industry related to men and women. So 34% of roles are held by women in tech versus 47% across all industries. So only 34% of the roles in technology. And I think a lot of that has to do, again, with us attracting and helping people see that vision. So on that note, we're going to go ahead and open up to our panel with our first question. So ladies, Michelle, if you'd like to start us off, basically, if you could please share with us what your organization's current plan and vision is for diversity.
Sure, thank you, Sacha, and thanks for having me back, actually. So at the Blazers, I mean, you guys might see us in the news quite a bit if you're local to Portland or to Oregon. But being that we're the local basketball team, we're constantly striving to just make sure that we are amplifying and augmenting voices in our company and in our community that are leading, diversity or initiatives or racial justice or racial injustice work, right? We also financially invest in nonprofit organizations that are working with marginalized communities or are trying to look for positive change through diversity, or even just trying to get rid of institutionalized or systemic racism in the organizations that they work for or even in the communities. So that's really part of our mission statement as far as DEI initiatives go. One other thing is also with our supplier pool, we look for diversity and we prefer suppliers or vendors who have that diversity background, who have that in their workforce and in their policies and operating procedures.
Thank you. And just a real quick comment for those of you that don't know, the Trailblazers for the last 20 years have basically been driving, whether or not people are aware of it, have really had an extremely diverse work pool, which is shocking because you would think of it as being a sports organization. But if you actually track their female leaders, they have really done a great job in recruiting them and actually elevating them into the organization. So on that note, Melody, would you mind sharing, the university's perspective on this topic from a vision?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So we kind of a little brief history from the University of Oregon. So we actually started back in 2005. So obviously before I arrived, I was here in last September. So I'm just about a year on my anniversary. And so the university has actually been working on it, certainly from promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in support of our students, but as a campus and being a really welcoming campus, but certainly extending out to the folks that we employ are also important. We do have, back in 2016, they actually identified the ideal framework. So we've got links that you'll see in the resources. So it's not, having it important is certainly an element of it. Having it be practical and actionable has really been something that the university has been focused on. So there's actually, each department is working or has put together their equity and inclusion plans. And so it actually shows tactics and strategies and goals for each area, because what it might mean, let's say in the IT organization, which actually we are working on that action plan right now, might be a little bit different, let's say, than the law schools plan. So it's really, you know, taking that higher level vision and translating it into the communities that we're serving. In being involved in this, you know, as we are supporting our students in this area, as we're prepping them for their launch into the community and to their careers, having greater exposure, having greater diversity is really good. So if we can model that in our own organization, and as they're interacting with their faculty or their administrators, that should also help enrich them and prepare them for when they're out there in the communities themselves. And there's a number of different things I think we'll answer in some of the subsequent questions about specific tactics and actions that we're using.
So Melody, something I didn't actually ask in our prep that I think would be interesting is, I know from a state perspective, and I'm assuming the university might be the same as a public institution, or some of those, is that information I believe is also available for anyone who might be interested in seeing the plan. Is that correct publicly?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, some links that I sent to you are the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Office. There's a lot of great resources there. And as you mentioned, Sasha, I came from Oregon State University in that interim. They've also got some excellent resources available. So this is something that I think, particularly with the universities, that we've really been digging into and are really trying to promote. We want to provide, like I said, a welcoming environment for our students. You know, when we think about not just their academic success, we're also thinking about other success pillars, be it financial, but a sense of belonging and wellness. And so we want our students to see that they are actually interacting with folks that maybe are like them, that they don't feel so left out in that social aspect. And then having the environment also reflect back in diversity is an important one. And so we really want to kind of create that whole experience for them, particularly when they're arriving on the UO campus.
Great. So if you wouldn't mind maybe taking our next question first, would you mind giving your perspective on really how the role of recruiting or attracting talent plays out into diversity?
Yeah, so I think that it happens, well, I'll put it this way. I don't think it only happens right during the actions of recruitment. So you decided you have a position, do that. And I think there's definitely things to do there. Again, we provided some resources that folks can leverage as far as other services to promote these positions to a diverse set of population. But I think that attracting diverse folks in the first place, and I'll say I don't simply think about it as a gender thing, as a cultural thing. I think it is really, I look at our customers as being people who give us money and who can take it somewhere else, right? And so our customers need to feel represented. Our customers need to feel that they are heard. And so it really starts with a layer of empathy, I believe, and that the mix of thoughts, the mix of backgrounds really enrich us to create a better experience, certainly in the IT arena. So if we're trying to be more empathetic to our customers, it's also important that we blend talents and experience together. And so I've had opportunity to help infuse some of that even with students, first year students, as they're looking at their careers. And information technology it may not just be simply I'm a programmer and this is all that I do, but what are the other dimensions of your skill set, be it from a psychology perspective, a design or art perspective. These are all enriching things, and we also bring with that diversity and thought. And so whether we are helping to expose that for our students or for our staff as they're growing. I think that's important. So I do a lot of informational interviews, and I have done that throughout my career. So if it's a college student, if it's a person that's looking at transitioning careers, that's a place that is outside of just the typical recruitment cycle and advertising a position that I think is actually really important, because sometimes people don't know what to ask. They might not have even totally exploited or exposed their strengths. And I think sometimes in just doing informational interviews for folks as they're exploring career opportunities is a really powerful way of attracting new talent, of attracting folks that maybe haven't necessarily fit a typical mold that traditionally, I think, position descriptions reinforce sometimes.
So real quick, a little add on to that. Can you give an example of where people were able to find you on informational interviews? Do they just reach out to you, or how do you basically make that available so people are aware? Or if someone on this call is curious about how do they get their leaders, because we have, recruiters and leaders, how they get other leaders to help them. Can you give us some tactics around that?
Yeah. Well, in the university systems, one of the things I'm going to highlight is quite a bit of universities have career development centers. So I will say, if you are interested in connecting with universities, and let's say, new for new students, so you're a person saying, hey, I'm looking at somebody earlier in the career, would highly recommend connecting with career development centers, because that's going to really provide an opportunity for you to connect as an employer to a university who's got a lot of bright-eyed, brand new folks that are very interested in getting exposure. So I think that's one way. If you are a job seeker yourself, I see a number of different networking things. Sometimes it's connecting with a person, let's say in a role or position that you are kind of interested in, or in a field that you're interested in, reaching out. Some people find me on LinkedIn. There's other networking groups that I belong to, or I know folks that have said, oh, hey, I've got, a staff person who I think is interested in this, or they're feeling kind of stuck and they'd like to, talk to somebody. There's always those opportunities. I think if you just kind of open up to those, I don't want to say they're so prescriptive. There was a person I talked to who was friends with somebody who was based out of Colombia, and they're really interested in some policy elements and natural resources combined with international studies. I mean, it was those kinds of things, and it was just like through networking, you can actually get connected with quite a bit of people. And so I think just kind of putting your intention out there and talking to folks, I think has opened up a lot of different opportunity and insights that you might not have typically thought about. So I think groups like this is a really good one. But like I said, in the university, I would highly recommend career development centers, or saying, hey, I'm really interested in talking to somebody who's done such and such in an organization. And people are pretty good, I think, and really responsive. I think people want to help each other out. So I actually haven't ever found that there's any barriers to connecting to folks if you're just talking about an informational interview without any kind of hiring strings attached, I'll say.
That's great. Thank you very much for taking my sidebar question. Michelle, would you like to kind of comment on your perspective in regards to the role that recruiting and takes, has, or how you attract or expand that talent pool?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's important, especially in this day and age where diversity and racial equality is so much in the news. It's being talked about openly, which is a great thing. I always say, for my kids, it's going to be a much different world than what I had to experience, right? We kind of like just took it on the chin and just kind of dealt with it when it happened, whether it was at work or socially or wherever. But I think for me, it's like I'm spending 10 to 12 hours a day at work, right? I want to be with people who bring a lot of varied perspectives, different experiences, how they got to this line of work or how they got to this job or this part of the country. It's so interesting and different. And they bring all of that with them to work every day. And hopefully you create that environment where they feel it's okay and it's welcomed to be that way, right? And that's what I try to encourage. That's what I talk to my recruiters about. Now you got to understand, I am an IT person. I'm not a HR person. So my field of influence is within whatever I'm hiring for IT, right? But I tell them, look, IT, this is a sports company. We naturally tend to get a lot of mail, either candidates or even people who are interested. I will get so many messages on LinkedIn from, male students who are about to graduate or have just graduated, and they're not even maybe in IT. They're like videographers, or they're, people who do creative design or things like that. And they'll constantly ping me on LinkedIn or wherever to find out more about the company. How can they get in? And how can they... The sad part about that is there are no females who do that. And I don't know whether it's because, oh, we're a sports company and it might be too, male heavy or whatever. But back to Sachi's point, we have a lot of our leadership is female based. A lot of us are just welcoming people who have that, maybe that hesitancy to, oh, should I really join a sports and entertainment company? Is it going to be, okay for me as a female? What's the environment like? So what I try to do is I work with my diversity group to make sure that our website at least has all of our initiatives posted. So people who are interested can go there and look at what we're doing in the community, look at what we're doing at work, look at our leaders. You can see what they look like, and you know how diverse our community is, our work community is. Also, I think it's just important to be able to have different perspectives, because I think the way you approach problems and solving those problems is so different. And to have that wide array of input, experience, I think is very important. And the only way you can do that is bringing in people into the organization that can help you with that.
Thanks, Michelle. So we, as usual, are starting to run out of time. We're down to our less than 20 minutes. So I want to, you both have talked about some creative ways. So before we enter into kind of this next part of the questions, what I wanted to basically say is one of the things that we have definitely identified, and you're both referenced it, has to do with the job description. So a statistic that I think most women are familiar with is the fact, and I'll just quote HBR here, men apply for a job when they meet only 60% of the qualifications, but women apply only if they meet 100% of them. I feel like that is a major barrier oftentimes to expanding the candidate pool. That basically also came from an internal HP study. So can you share with some of the creative things that your organizations are doing to really attract female candidates? And you might have touched on some of those, but anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. So we use, and we're mandated by our HR team to use this, a product called Textio, Textio. And it's a product that kind of, not wordsmiths, but it makes suggestions as to how to improve your job description. And they've done a bunch of like studies and came up with, some kind of recommendations. So for example, they look at the words that you're using in your job description, and some words are, more threatening to certain genders than others are, right? Like, so for example, the word, effortlessly, or words like natural ability or natural talent, or high performer. These are in some cases threatening words. So we have to replace those with other words. Then they also did a study where they said, men prefer to have everything listed in bullet form, whereas women don't. Now, personally, I think the opposite, but maybe I'm the exception to that study. But it's things like that we're, supposed to write, like, don't make your sentences too long about what you're asking for. People who just get lost. Right, so Textio does that for us. That's like an important tool that we have to use every time we decide to post, something online, a job description. The other thing also that we do is, I'll try to make this quick, Melody, because I'm sure you have some great ideas too. The other thing we do is we have on our panel interview, we have somebody from our DEI group, or at least from the allyship subgroups in our organization, present on every interview, so that there is that aspect of DEI, not just for us, but also, for the candidate to be able to ask questions and get a sense of comfort from knowing what they're getting into. But those are like two of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, the only thing to add, and I'll say, since I'm still relatively new at the University of Oregon, but at Oregon State University, again, a link on the resources, is they have what they call a search advocate program, very similar to what Michelle was talking about, but they actually train a number of different folks across the university, and they learn some of these things about unconscious bias in position descriptions. So the hiring manager might not necessarily know themselves, but they would have a partner to work with them throughout the entire process, and really help be a search advocate to make sure that they're taking a look at how position descriptions are written, looking at the diversity even of the committee, selection committee themselves, and factoring those things in, thinking about your interview questions. And so that's kind of another kind of resource model that I saw in my previous institution.
By the way, thank you, ladies. For those of you who are curious about some of the resources just mentioned, T2 and a few others are posting them in the chat. So if you aren't looking at the chat, you might want to, which is great. Melody, is there anything else creatively that you think your organization does to kind of expand the scope, the brand, the message, right, that all are welcome?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I kind of want to hit on what Michelle, was saying of the website, don't underestimate the power of the organization's website to show a welcoming and inclusive environment. And I think that's kind of something that is always out there, probably always a challenge and something to pay attention to. So to the degree that we can start thinking about that sooner than later. I also wrap in accessibility to those things. So, if there are accessibility challenges and needs, that those are also factors, right? Beyond ethnicity and gender, there's other aspects that we also want to try to create a more welcoming environment and not creating those barriers. Again, what do we go to when we're looking at information about a company or an organization? We go to a website. So I think when we think about that, so working with your communication departments on that, I think is a really powerful tool to do that. And you're never going to be done. and I would also say never assume. I think opening up the dialogue, encouraging people. And I think we can do that every single day. I don't think it's just DEI's responsibility. I think it's all of our responsibilities to really think about this, to open up, to encourage, and whether it's encouraging a student or a job seeker or your own staff, to really help highlight their strengths, to help them see, just because you didn't think you checked all the boxes doesn't mean you should give up. Just because you don't fill a particular mold that you think that the industry is focused in on, don't let that shut you down, really. And I would always say we can encourage everybody, and we all have the power. We don't have to just be a hiring manager to do that. We could be a peer and do that. So that's what I would also encourage folks to do.
That's great. Thank you. So you both have mentioned, I think, a few personal things, but if you had anything else to add, would you mind sharing kind of any of your personal initiatives or other best practices you haven't already mentioned related to this?
I think another thing that we do here at the Blazers, and this is a fun thing, like the things we've talked about, like Texture and all is great, but it's, it's a tool, and using a tool. A fun thing that we do at the Blazers is every so often our DEI team will give us like a gift voucher promoting, that month is dedicated to some kind of like minority group, right? So they'll promote like, oh, go take a Grubhub voucher to all these female-owned restaurants, and you can get dinner, on the company from those restaurants. And they'll give you a list of restaurants, makes it really easy to know which restaurants are women-owned. You don't have to go and figure that out on your own. Or they'll do let's celebrate, Asian Heritage Month, and then all the Asian-owned restaurants that are participating. So I think that's another thing that, that kind of helps promote these businesses. It's not just in the workforce, you can expand outside that. So if you guys want to talk to your leadership about programs like that, it's definitely something worth doing. The other one thing is just encourage your leadership to speak on panels like this. right? Because then you can put that on your website and say, hey, our leadership participates, they're promoting, they're raising awareness about topics like this, which means people will get attracted to your company because of such events.
And I think that you, real quickly, I'm going to add, because I want to ask a question about social media, but I don't want to let go the comment you just made by having a DEI panelist or person on the panel when you're interviewing. We heard from, some of us have been in, some have heard from Bob Leake speak, and they put a whole initiative in because they actually were losing diverse talent because they were not aware, right, of some of the bias that they had. And then the way that they culturally weren't as welcoming, and they put in an initiative. And one of the first things they changed tactically was to make sure that when someone was interviewing as a candidate, that they saw a diverse panel there, and that wasn't happening before. So to your point, I think that is not to be undervalued. I know today a lot of that's happening virtually, but just think about who you have interviewing people in your interview process, right? And make sure that there is some diversity represented in that conversation. Would you quickly, Michelle, I know just from the conversation we've had in the past that I think you use social media also to create awareness. Is that true? Or do either of you have any success using your personal brand or company brand in attracting talent through social media?
We do as a company. I personally not too active on social media, except for LinkedIn, yes. But as a company, we do have a very strong, presence and a platform, thanks to our team, really, that does promote a lot of that. And also with us just being, just investing in nonprofit organizations in the community, or we have a bunch of different foundation programs that we also support. And I think through all of that, again, all on our website, we make sure we put that there so that we're attracting the right people.
So we're down. Sorry, go ahead.
I was really quick. And again, you'll see that in the list of resources. I mentioned a recruitment advertising kind of service that the university uses. It's called Job Elephant. And that actually can help you identify a number of different services that can also promote. So some of the ones that I listed is Women in Technology International, National Association of Asian American Professionals. There's one specific to like veterans in higher education, again, for higher ed, Journal of Blacks in Higher Education, and then other diversityjobs.com. So, I mean, there's a number of different services that are really to help advertise to a variety of different populations. And so that was one I learned about through kind of a recent recruitment we were doing. And so, but Job Elephant kind of helps broker out those types of things. So you may find some good leads that way too. And maybe additional resources, even off of their sites.
That's great. And just a reminder, we absolutely still welcome questions. So I've been watching the chat. I haven't necessarily seen any questions, so that's why we've kind of continued down the string. But if you do have one, please post it because we would absolutely love to answer those. And thank you, Michelle, for offering up for people to reach out to you via LinkedIn if there's other questions. So we'll end on the last question, unless someone has something in the chat, which really has to do with the power of encouragement. Melody, I heard you reference that earlier around how we all have a role in this, whether it be peers or leaders. If you want to add anything to that, and Michelle too, we'd love to hear your comments on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, the specific story that I had to share, I had an opportunity to work with freshmen who were computer science students. This is back in Oregon State University, which was great. These were freshmen, they were new, they were just trying to find their way. And they, the opportunity I gave them is, are you interested in improving students' journey? And so right there, they were like, yes, I want to do whatever I can to help, because this was kind of a challenging thing to navigate. Well, through that process, I actually wanted to expose them to customer journey mapping. I wanted to expose them to areas of enterprise architecture. And actually through that, they said, yeah, because we weren't really sure that we just wanted to be computer programmers. Like that's what we were enrolled in, but that wasn't entirely speaking to us. And it actually helped them see other avenues in information technology and actually make some adjustments. Because what we actually found was they really did kind of start knowing where their strengths were and what they wanted to do. And it actually propelled them to leverage those strengths in something that was not a traditional IT path, but felt that they really still fit, and that it actually, and I said, gosh, this is great, because you're going to find areas of communication and problem solving and working with people and being empathetic to your customers are going to play very well in your future career in information technology. You don't have to just be a computer programmer. And that encouraged them to pursue their next set of interests. I will say, compare and contrast. I've heard other stories from other folks that they went through a computer science program and then didn't make it, didn't have that encouraging person, and then just gave up. Just thought, I guess I'm just not good in IT. I guess I'm just not good in this particular skill, and maybe this isn't for me. And so that was really sad for me to hear. And so I will say, personally, anytime I hear folks that are even remotely interested in the area of information technology, I really talk to them about all the different things that are available in this area, because it's not just about being in the back room coding. That's really important. There's so many other avenues that we need in diversity of thought and background and experience and empathy and human perspective. I always say technology is powerful when you tap into the human dimension, and to the degree that we as humans are connecting with those various backgrounds and experiences just means that we're going to have better solutions as a result of it.
That's great. Thank you. Michelle, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So my story, I think, is a interesting one, the way it developed. But so last year, this is before I even joined Blazers, we had an intern here who was helping us out, like, with setting up the games. So she just had to, like, pull wires, connect them, make sure the referee belt packs were working, the scoreboard, stats board, all of that was working, right? Which is not a small task. And one of those things even goes wrong, it can break the game, right? But so she started to help us out. And then she was an intern, so her time was up and everything, and she left. And I was looking for an IT ops specialist, which is exactly what she was doing, but this is not an intern level, it's one level above. This is when I started now, and way back in November. And the team said, oh, you know what, she's available, maybe we should get her back. And I'm looking at her, and she has a sports therapy background. She's got her master's in sports therapy. She was working on a master's for IT, but hadn't gotten it yet. And I'm like, she doesn't have an IT background. How are we going to make this work? And the team's like, oh, but she's really good. She picks up really quickly. She has a great attitude, great work ethic. I'm like, okay, let's talk to her. So we had other resumes coming in and everything, and we asked her to submit her resume as well. And we spoke to her, and eventually our top candidate wasn't interested, or we lost him by the time we could get moving or whatever. We talked to her. We had a great conversation, she and I. Like, the whole team knew her already, so we were already, like, bought in. She comes in, we hire her. She comes in, she started off as IT ops specialist, told me that she wanted to become an IT project manager eventually, and was getting certified and all of these things. So threw her into project management, because that's where she wanted to be. And I believe that you should, try to help people out with their career goals, right? So now she starts doing project management. She's really good at that, working super hard to kind of figure all these things out. And now, 3 months later, I've asked her to help me with configuration of ServiceNow, which is something that we're bringing into the organization. And she's doing that as well. And I'm like, who would have thought that this girl who, like, had no IT background has just been able to pick up these things so quickly? And her work ethic is just remarkable. And I have never looked back, and I have never doubted that decision ever since. So for me, that was like just giving somebody a chance, going with your gut feel rather than all the boxes that you check on paper, right? And it just worked out really great. So, I would say the lesson I learned was just make sure you keep an open mind and really look for, people who, you think are going to really help you get the job done and have a great attitude. And that's it.
Thank you, Michelle. I think that's a great kind of great way to wrap. And I'm just going to add one comment on that. Everybody on this call, the thing that you can really do around technology is, I know I was a product of a doctor's household, so that's all I saw. I think that's what it is for most kids. I think with the internet, we're doing a better job of exposing them. But understand that oftentimes students think they're going into a discipline and that discipline looks just like it does at entry level, versus I think what we've all learned through our careers is that really it's an accumulation of the experiences and skills that you gather over time. So if you have an area of interest, and I've heard both Melody, Michelle reference that, please make sure you're encouraging people to explore. And definitely all those, I'm just going to say young girls, because in general, they don't tend towards STEM, but even though the numbers are getting better, those young girls, the first question I usually ask them if they're in high school, I'm like, are you good in math and science? And if you are, think about being an engineer, right? It's just a starting point. There's a lot of opportunity, right, when you get that baseline understanding and foundation. So anyway, thank you. Tito, real quick, we're going to go ahead and wrap now. Thank you so much to Michelle and Melody for being great panelists. Hopefully you enjoyed their stories as much as I did. Just a quick refresh. We are planning on extending this series. If you would like a topic that you're interested to be explored, please submit it through the event survey you'll be getting later today. Also, for anyone who does complete the survey, we'll go ahead and send out that list of resources. A number of those were mentioned on the call. And then a few other events that are coming up with SIM, as we have an awards banquet, which is the CIO and CISO of the year. Those awards will be given out on the 8th. And we have our annual golf tournament here locally in Portland at the Stone Creek Golf Club. And this golf tournament, basically, I believe all the sponsorships are sold out at this point, but it raises funds for scholarships. We basically have a few scholarships that we give away every year to local students that are in basically information management. And then we also have a strength-based leadership workshop, which I believe you only have to buy the books and register to attend, which is on September 29th, and that will be virtual. So really appreciate everyone attending today. Again, appeal to fill out the survey. And on that note, we'll go ahead and close down the call. Have a lovely week. Thank you, ladies.